Well, good morning or good evening or good whenever you happen to be joining us here at the North Point online community this week. For me, it is good afternoon here in Old Town Louisville, and I'm really glad that you have joined us. If this is your first time, you'll notice maybe that we do things just a little differently here online anyway. But we are especially glad to welcome you if this is your first time, and I hope that you stay with us for the next 35 minutes or so. I think you'll be glad that you did. My name is Mike Farah, and I am the senior pastor, lead pastor, main pastor, teaching pastor, ringmaster, sheep herder, oldest pastor here at North Point Christian Church. My family and I moved here nearly 26 years ago from Southern California so that I could become the youth minister here at this same church in this same location. And we have called North Point our home ever since. I got to tell you, we pretty much fell in love with this place immediately. The people, the neighborhood, the larger community, even Texas culture. Me being, both my wife and I and our kids really being deeply Southern California. The shift to Texas was pretty seamless, and we have never really looked back. But the main thing that helped that transition was the North Point family that we met all of those years ago, and we continue to still call our church family. Right when we walked in the door back then, there was for us a spirit of acceptance and generosity that reflected, I think, the truest character of Jesus. We found that here almost the moment that we walked in through the door. And that has never, ever changed. It is who we are as a church body. It's in our blood. I think it just seems to be woven into the character of the people, whether it's new people or people who have been here for years. It's just kind of woven into the character of these folks who call this their home. And that grace that welcomes anybody, and I mean anybody, has only grown deeper and more profound through the years. That's what means the most to me. And whether you already call North Point your home, or you're looking for a church to throw in with and call your own, I am seriously glad we committed to doing digital church about a year ago. So this right here could be your place to connect, at least for the first time. And maybe, who knows, maybe we can do this in person someday, maybe even soon. So if this is your first time with us, we will invite you to join in just a little bit later in taking the Lord's Supper with us. That's something that we do every Sunday, and we even do it digitally. So I want to encourage you, just take a moment. It may feel a little awkward, I don't know, but go and get some bread and some juice, whatever you have on hand will do. Make sure you have it near you when we all come to the table together in just a few minutes. As we get started in our study and our worship today, I want us to spend, as we do each week, a few moments going to God in prayer. And you can join us by following along on the screen. The words will be there for you. Let that guide you into the presence of God in a deeper way right now. So we started this study a couple of weeks ago using the metaphor of staying at the table. And what it really means is stay at the table long enough for something good to happen. Stay at the table long enough for God to bless you. Wrestle with Him long enough so that He gives you exactly what He wants to give you. Stay at the table long enough for us to work out the differences that we have with each other. Today, I want to talk about staying at the table long enough to deal with your doubts. Now, as I've done each week, we have some chips and salsa that's here, and it's largely symbolic. But the chips and salsa have to do with how easy it is to stay at the table when you're with friends and you're eating and enjoying company, even to the point of going and getting a refill on it. Today, I want you to think of staying at the table of doubt long enough that you can actually become comfortable with it and begin to deal with it the way that God intended. As I was preparing this week, I remembered an episode in my own personal life that was both painful and deeply transformative for me and my closest friends who I shared this moment with. For me, I was in my early to mid 30s. We were actually living in California at that time. And I can look back on that time And I can tell you that was for about a 2 or 3 year stretch. It was some of the most difficult times I've ever gone through in my life. There are a lot of people that I shared life with back then that even to this day probably don't have any idea what I was fully going through during that time. Though there were some who were particularly close that would remember this, but it was a time of great loss and great disillusionment with myself, with the church. I dealt with some death during that time that was particularly painful. I faced what I felt back then and really do even now, some massive inequity and unfairness. And out of that came for me it was like a total disconnect from God. Now bear in mind, I'm a pastor, youth and family pastor, more of an associate. I preach regularly. I was a leader, part of our entire leadership team, and this time that I was disconnected from God was a time when I was still going through the motions of my leadership position in this church. There were days that I woke up and I was angry. There were other days I woke up and I was completely, totally empty. I was confused. I had arrived at this spot in my life where there was a disbelief about some of the core things that I had held on to most all of my life. It just stirred inside me. This restlessness was something that I had never faced before in my life. And I can tell you, it was really the first time I had ever dealt with doubt in my life. I would go to bed at night and I would pray, God, why are you not answering my prayers? I would constantly go through this in my own mind of why is it that God feels so distant right now? Why was he, my goodness, why was he letting these bad things happen? They had never happened before, not in this way. I had at that point in my life, at age 33 or 34, I guess I had lived a relatively insulated life. I'd had people die and I'd gone through some difficult times, but nothing at all like this. I just felt like I was being attacked from every side in my emotions and in my faith. And what happened, I experienced for the first time depression in my life. And it was a depression that wouldn't go away. God's promises seemed shallow and empty. And on top of all of that, not everybody, but there were church leaders who were my friends. They ended up being, I thought, calloused and even hypocritical to me. And I got to tell you, my faith was just crushed. My own future was a complete and total mystery. It was just really a really difficult time for me. So one of the things that I did, and even in those days, it was interesting because I was encouraged not to do this. But I brought my struggle to the surface. I decided I needed to talk to my friends about it, the very people that I led. And so I had circled around me a group of leaders that were my closest of friends. And I remember as if it were yesterday. We circled up kind of in my living room at my house, and I began to tell them this story of what I've just told you. And I remember them sitting there just staring at me as I talked. They didn't ask questions. They just sat and stared. And at the end of it, there was this silence that I had never experienced before. And one of them said to me, Mike, we don't want to hear any more of this. You are not the one that's supposed to fall apart. And then they proceeded to struggle. Many of them were struggling themselves, struggling in silence. They did not want to hear my doubts and my struggle. I felt totally rejected, totally deflated, and honestly, with the exception of Wanda, I felt totally alone. So where do doubts come from? I guess I've come to understand that there is, for most people, a path to doubt. It goes something like this. If God is all-powerful, and if God is totally good and totally loving, why doesn't He stop bad things from happening? Look, you may phrase it differently than what I just did, but that's the same line of questioning that most every person of faith goes through at one time or another in their lives. And it begins this process in our lives of starting to doubt whether God even exists, doubting that He cares, doubting the faithfulness and trustworthiness of the Bible, even doubting the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. I'll ask you this, is it possible for faith and doubt to coexist? There's a story in the Bible. Jesus tells of it, and it's a father of a demon-possessed boy. And this father is in total anguish and despair because of his love for his boy and what he was going through. And he turns to Jesus for help. This man's life had been a long, dark night, attempting absolutely every imaginable remedy for his son's horrifying and torturous madness, and nothing had worked. Inside the father, conflict between doubt and despair and faith was raging, and it was ruining him. And Jesus asks the boy's father, "How long has it been like this?" The man answers him and says, "Well, it's been since his childhood. This demon inside of him has often thrown him into the fire or into water to kill him. But Jesus, if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." And here's what Jesus said. If you can, he asked this question. He asked this question back to the man. If you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for the one who believes. Immediately, the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." Help me overcome my unbelief. Now, there's some more to this story, but we're going to stop at that point because this is the part that matters to us today. It is easy to have faith when everything makes sense. It's easy to have faith when everything is going our way and it appears that God just heaps blessing after blessing and answered prayer after answered prayer on us. But it's difficult and painful sometimes to trust God and live for Him when things don't seem to add up. Remember this again, the path to doubt. The path to doubt is if God is all-powerful and totally good and totally loving, why doesn't He stop bad things from happening? That's a question that has plagued humanity since the beginning of time. One minute it seems perfectly natural and unquestionable that God exists and cares for the world and loves the world. And in the very next moment, it seems totally naive to believe that. Why is that? Have you sometimes felt like walking out of the church service because the whole thing just seems contrived and empty? Someone at work says, "You know what? Those Christian people, it's as if they check their brains at the door of church every Sunday, and most of them don't even bother to pick them up on the way out. There is no way that thinking people could ever conceive, let alone love, a God who acts so unjustly and so unloving sometimes." You know, for me, I've come to believe that an honest doubter is one who is thinking deeply and questioning often. At least that's the way it works for me. When I doubt, when I'm going through a period of doubt, my mind is at work and I hold on to that. I think there are too many believers think they have captured this whole faith thing, this message of Christianity, and placed it in a neat little box. And then they go and put a sticker on top of the box that says, "Don't ask, don't tell, don't cause problems with your questions, don't make waves, don't raise your hand, don't doubt." So what do I do with those times when my intellect challenges my beliefs? When do I get to question? When do I reflect? When do I get to doubt? Well, here's the truth that I live with. Maybe it will fit for you. I think doubt is necessary. You need to doubt, or you won't grow. There's a cause and effect that's in place. Doubt and questions can be the fuel that propels us to diligence in pursuing the ways and the words of Jesus. I want to end today. With words that the Apostle Peter, who was at this point in his life was in prison. He was facing execution for his faith. Execution under the reign and the rule of the Emperor Nero. And Peter writes, he writes to churches that are scattered through the Roman Empire at that time. And each one of those churches are facing similar persecutions. And Peter writes this letter. This letter, it's the second letter that he wrote to these churches. And he wrote it about 30 years after the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Try to picture this going on, a letter coming from prison from a guy that is facing his own imminent execution, writing to other believers who are facing a similar future. Earlier in the beginning of the letter, he had written the words for them to make every effort to pursue goodness, to pursue knowledge, to pursue self-control, to pursue patience, to pursue godliness. Make every effort to pursue love. This is what he encouraged them to do. And then he writes these words. They are so profound. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 10. Therefore, as you're pursuing those things, brothers and sisters, be all the more diligent to make certain about his calling and his choice of you. For as long as you practice these things, you will never stumble. You will never stumble. Doubt may be present. It's probably always present in some form or another in our lives. So let your doubts persuade you, motivate you, inspire you. Because if you pray for God to help you in your unbelief, He will. As we go to the table of the Lord's Supper today, how about if we come today with our doubts, rather than trying to set them off to the side in embarrassment or frustration? We just come to the table of communion with our doubts, with our struggles, with our questions, with our intellectual frustrations. Let's just bring it all to the table today. Let's stop running. Let's stop acting like we've got all of the answers and humbly approach God as seekers. Let's come to the table with some hopeful expectation as we eat the bread and we drink the juice of His life that was given on our behalf. I'm going to put a quote up on the screen right now. I want you to read it with me. It says this: "It is not as a child that I believe and confess Jesus Christ. My Hosanna is born of a furnace of doubt." Today, may our Hosannas be born of a furnace of doubt, so that those who hear our Hosannas might surrender their unbelief also.
Hear the voice of love that's calling. There's a chair that waits for you, and a friend who understands everything you're going through. Keep standing at a distance, the shadows of your shame. There's a light of table. It's nothing he ain't seen before. For all your sin, all your sorrow, your sadness, there's a Savior and he comes. Bring it on the table. He can see the weight you carry, the fears that hold your heart. Through the cross you've been forgiven. You're accepted as you are. So bring it on the table. It's nothing he ain't seen before. For all your trials, all your worries and your burdens, there's a Savior and he comes. Bring it on to the table. Come on in, take your place. There's no one who's turned away. All you sinners, all you saints, come right in, find your grace. Come on in, take your place. There's no one who's turned away. All you saints, come right in, find your grace. Bring it on the table. It's nothing he ain't seen before. For all your sin, all your sorrow, your sadness, there's a Savior and he comes. Bring it on to the table.
I hope you all have a great week. I really do. In the midst of a world that is full of confusion and division, like this one that we are living in right now, I want to challenge you to be people of love. Just be people of love. Be people who speak the language of love everywhere you go. Let people see the love of Jesus in every action you take, in every spoken word, in every written word, in every published word, in every interaction that you have. Down to the very look in your eyes. Be people of love this week. You see, God's word says that love is the greatest. Remember that everything else falls short. May the love of Jesus sustain you until the next time we can be together. See you.
Holiness, holiness is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. Holiness, holiness is what you want from me. So take my heart and form it. Take my mind, transform it. Take my will, conform it to yours, oh Lord. Faithfulness, faithfulness is what I long for. transform.